Hi and welcome to Car and Mechanical, and today I'm going to take you through how to rebuild, but you can also treat it as how to replace your master cylinder. Now the reason I'm doing that is you can see there when I push down, the pedal travels all the way to the floor. However, when I do pump it up, I do get some stiffness in the pedal there. So what we're going to do to start, we're going to take the master cylinder off. So to start to get to the master cylinder, we want to take off some of this intercooler piping that's getting in the way. So the master cylinder is just back there, we can see the yellow cap on the bottle. So we're going to take off the top intercooler pipe, so we've just undone the spring clips and that's going to get moved to one side. We're then going to take off the EGR delete pipe, so that's done up I think with something like T50 Torx bolts, and we're going to undo that on all three sides, and I'm going to skip ahead in a minute because it's quite difficult to get to, but we just want to make as much room as possible so we can get in there. If you do drive a left-hand drive version of the car, then it will be a little bit different to this. You'll be clearing stuff from the other side, maybe like the battery and some of the airbox and stuff like that. So you can also see I've taken off the vacuum pipe that goes to my boost gauge as well, because we don't want that in the way in a moment. Now it might be you don't have an EGR delete pipe, but you've got your EGR, so that will need to come out of the way as well, because you're not going to be able to get your hands down there in a minute. So as I've moved on a bit here, I've got the bolts mostly undone. I'm just going to finish taking them out by hand so I don't drop them, and so I can grab hold of the EGR delete pipe just to get that out of the way in a second. So what I'm also doing, I'm just putting the bolts to one side somewhere safe where I know I can get hold of them again. I hate leaving them in the pipe or something like that. You put it down, they roll away, you come to put everything back together, and you're not in a great place. So in order to get the master cylinder out, what I've also got to do is we've got to disconnect the sensor, we've got to take off the cap, and before we disconnect any of the lines, we're going to have to remove the fluid from the master cylinder, or from the reservoir on top. You are going to leak some, but you want to leak as little as possible. So what I'm doing here, I'm just sucking some of the brake fluid out and just putting it into a jug, so we want to get rid of that later. This method I'm showing you was quite slow, so what I ended up doing, I ended up putting some line onto that and just sort of sucking it out a couple of times with the line, and I managed to get about that much out. And so there was some left in there, but I got out quite a bit that wasn't going to leak all over the drive. Just also take this filter out, do that before the line, but my filter's got a hole in it from a previous owner, so it's no good and something I'll look to repair. Also, jumping back, there's a bracket on the intake manifold that I needed to take off because it would have got in the way when I was undoing everything with spanners. So now we've got access, what we're going to do, I'm going to show you where the lines are. So you've got two lines underneath the master cylinder. Those need an 11mm spanner to undo, and you have two bolts. You have one there that's 13mm, the other one is underneath the bottle. So we're also going to remove this line here which goes across to the master cylinder of the clutch. So I think it's a 10mm, but I'm just going to undo it with a screwdriver here. So just undo that one, and as you finish with it, just pull the line off and pop it to one side like I'm just doing there. Just before moving ahead, I just wanted to cut across to the master cylinder because I couldn't really film this bit. Underneath you've got the two 10mm lines that you need to undo. So just undo those. They are going to take a little bit of time to undo, but once we've done that we can move on to the next bit. So to continue taking the master cylinder off, we're going to use a 13mm socket, and I'm going to do the first of the two bolts that attaches the master cylinder to the servo. So we've got the first bolt off, the second one is blocked by the bottle, so we're going to pop that off. You can get a screwdriver underneath and it will just lift up quite nicely. And then you can see the second bolt down there. So we're going to get the 13mm again, and I'm just going to crack the bolt off and I'm just going to undo the rest by hand. So once that's done, you can pull the master cylinder out, and you're then left with the space to either put one back in if you're just replacing it, or we're going to move on to the rebuild. So now we've got the master cylinder out, we're going to move over to rebuild it. So what I've got here is a master cylinder rebuild kit from eBay. It was about £10. It comes with everything you need to rebuild the cylinder. So we're going to start by taking the various bits off of the master cylinder. So we've got these two rubber bungs here that are seals and bungs for the bottle. So you're going to take those off. So screwdriver get in there. Don't worry about damaging the ones you take off because they're getting thrown away. There's a little sort of space washer in there as well. So take that little washer out too, and we're going to move over to take the circlip off in a second. Now this was a complete pain in the backside because they're not meant to be taken off. So you can do it with a couple of screwdrivers just to force it out. Next you want to hold on to that seal there, and you want to push down on the barrel. It will then pop up and it will let you take the assembly out like you can see here. I lost that tiny bit of the video as my memory card got full. So next we're going to remove the retaining pin that's holding the second piston inside the cylinder. So you can see that pin just there. grab some pliers and just pull it out. Unfortunately, my camera memory card corrupted again, so I lost pulling the cylinder out. You can, however, just remove it with some long needle nose pliers and it would just come out of the cylinder, and that's the piston that we can see there. So we're going to remove these two seals from it. They're just going to pull off and over. Again, don't worry about them, just pull them right over and off. So that's the top one, and you want to pick the matching seal to that. So to continue here, put the matching seal back on so you've got the new seal, and do the same for the other end of the piston. So just here, we're just going to remove the old seal for the master cylinder for where it goes into the servo. So that will just come out, and that's been squashed down by the pressure of where it's been put in place, and we're going to put the new one in place. The new one will be tighter, but when it does go into the servo, it will get squashed down, it will get a nicer fitting. So moving to the main piston, I'm going to take the end seal off, and we're just going to have a look at how that compares to the new seals with the kit. So the OEM part was in one piece, the original part. The new part comes in two pieces which interlock together. So I'm just going to show you the differences between them, or how they do match up and how you can tell what ends what. So that's the piece that came out of the car, and that was the side showing out and then in. And again, we'll look at this side and we can see how that fits together. Now again, I seem to have lost this bit, but I just want to show you another seal that you need to change on the main piston. So that seal that's just shown up there with the writing, you can either pull it up over the spring, or there's a torque screw just in the end. By removing that screw, you can take the spring off and easily remove the old seal and put the new seal on without damaging it by dragging it over the spring. So now we're going to put everything on the master cylinder back in. So you've just seen me put the spring there into the master cylinder. That's for the first, or the innermost piston. We're going to put the piston in as well in a moment, and that piston needs to be facing so that the holding pin can go in from the side like this, so we can see that there. So it's going to face out towards the direction of the holding pin, and you're just going to push that down into the spring. So take that out from the workbench, or however you're doing it, and hopefully you can just about see here that I put the pin back in, and that goes into the piston, which then holds that one in place, or stops it from coming out too far. So next we're going to put the second piston assembly back in. So you can see the assembly just here. Now it's already been stripped off, so we're going to put this holding pin back in, and that's going to drop down. You want to just make sure it just about fits in, because the pin does want to slip out. And then I'm going to show you the order that everything goes back in at. So we've got this shim which goes in first. The seals that we were using the first time round aren't needed. You just need the new seals. So there's a white seal and a little black seal that you can see on the side of the bench. So I've put this in its two parts. So the first part and then the second part that interlocks onto it. I'm just going to pull that up to make sure it all fits together nice and tightly. And we're then going to push it down onto its spring in a second. And we're just going to push that down so it clicks into place. And just to aid me here, I've cut some PVC plastic pipe to size, which helps to push it down and to keep the seal in place. Okay, so we're literally on to the very last two bits we need to put this back into the car. So we're going to put the circlip on using circlip pliers. So put that in at a bit of an angle and close the circlip as much as you can. And you want it just so it's kind of clicks into place. I'm struggling a bit there, trying to manoeuvre it. In the end, just use my finger. And as it just goes in, then it'll pop open. So we're going to put that little washer space we had earlier, and we're going to put that back into place. That goes into where the piston pin went into, and we've got these two new caps, and they just pop in easy as anything, if the bench is tied up anyway. So with the bench tightened up, pop that cap in, pop the other cap, stroke, seal, stroke, bung in, and it is ready to go back in the car. Okay, so moving over to the engine bay, we're going to have a look at where it's going to fit up to. So it's going to go back onto where the servo is there, and you need to make sure that it lines up and it goes right into what you can see there is like a pin that will fit into the master cylinder. Just at the end of where my finger is that I'm moving, that has to line up and go onto it, otherwise you're going to have to take it out and put it back on again. So we're going to take the master cylinder, we're going to line it up, and we're just going to fit it into place. So it should essentially go over the two bolts there, but at the same time we want to make sure it lines up inside the servo, which it's done there, and we're just going to put that on. So what we're then going to do is we're going to do up the two 13mm bolts, which is easy enough, so we'll just start them off by hand and then do them up with a ratchet. Okay, so I'm just going to point out where everything fits on. So you've got the two lines underneath that need fitting. There's the 13mm bolts that need doing up, which are already fitted there that you can see. I just wanted to take a minute to also talk about putting the lines back on, because this was quite difficult. Now, to undo them, it's going to be just fine with the 11mm spanner, but when you're putting them back on, you're going to find that they might not want to thread in properly, and I did start to end up cross-threading one, and I was able to resolve that, but it did cost quite a bit of time. So if you do get the opportunity, clean up the threads on everything as you're putting it back together, and take your time and make sure that it is properly fitted as you start to tighten the lines back up. Now, unfortunately, due to some of the issues I had on the day when I did this job, I've lost some of the pictures and end footage of how it all went back together. But so far, the lines have gone back on. We're going to put the bottle on, which will just literally push straight on. There's the master cylinder for the clutch line. That just clips on and screws up again. And then we want to put your brake fluid in. But by this point, if you've managed to take everything back off, putting it back on is just the reverse. So you should be absolutely fine with that. Again, as I mentioned, just be careful with the lines. So that's pretty much it for the rebuild. It took a couple of hours to do. And one thing I'm not covering in this video is the brake bleeding, because with Volkswagen Audis, they have a bit of a complicated system for bleeding the brakes. And although we flushed through the fluid, we couldn't get the pedals to go fully hard again. And what I'd like to do is figure out the right method for doing this with the Audi, and to be able to present that to people to say, right, this is how you do it, because you can pressure bleed it, and also you need to use VAGCOM to cycle the ABS, and I think there's a little bit of air hiding in the ABS at the moment. So after the rebuild, the master cylinder's absolutely fine, it works. I took it on a 600 mile the very next day and it was absolutely perfect. But I haven't got the stiff pedal I want, and I think that's due to air in the system. However, the whole point of this was to rebuild the master cylinder in case the seals had flipped, and they were what was causing me to have a soft pedal. So thank you very much for watching this. I hope it's been helpful. If you do have any questions, please leave them in the comments section below. Also, please subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos I'll be putting up in the future.